Today we celebrate the feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. We focus on the sufferings of Our Lady, which also is part of the co-redemption of all of us. In other words, Mary, more than anyone else, participated in bringing about our salvation, not just in making possible the events of salvation, but also suffering with Christ. You're probably familiar with the story of St. Maximilian Kolbe, how he gave his life for one of the other inmates in the prison, and how Maximilian Kolbe was basically killed by a lethal injection in the concentration camp where he was at. Some people, what they don't know about the story is that the moment that he died, his mother, who was hundreds of miles away, she fainted. She was walking on the sidewalk and she fainted. She knew that her son at that moment had died. And it just goes to show this very, very great bond that exists between a mother and her children. Not just because the mother carries the child in the womb for 9 months, but because of that love. Love is a unitive force, and I think the greater the love that exists, the more connected people are, not just physically, but even at great distances. There is this bond, this connection, this understanding of what the other person might be going through. When we think of the tremendous love of Our Lady for her divine Son, there is no greater love of any woman that could ever exist. So she has the greatest possible love because her heart is immaculate. And part of the reason it's immaculate is so that she could love her divine Son with a complete love, but also so that she can love all of us. It is worthwhile for us to think about and even to meditate on the different sufferings of Our Lady. And traditionally there's 7 of them. We can think of more, but traditionally there are 7, and I just wanted to read them off for you. So the prophecy of Simeon, when Simeon predicts that this child will become kind of a stumbling block for the rising of many and the fall of many, and that a sword shall pierce Mary's own heart. But for Mary to know that her child would be the cause of so much opposition or so many people falling away, that he would be rejected by so many, that would have caused her pain. So the first suffering of Our Lady is this prophecy of Simeon, and of course the flight into Egypt, the slaughter of the innocents. You know, imagine a mother thinking, oh, these people want to kill my baby, and they're willing to kill so many innocent others. Then the loss of the Christ child for 3 days when he was 12 years old, when he stayed behind in the temple. Meeting Jesus on the way of the cross, when Jesus is carrying his cross and he encounters Our Lady on the way. His death on the cross, so our Lord's death on the cross. And the 6th sorrow is when our Lord is taken down from the cross and Our Lady holds the lifeless body of her divine Son in her own arms. And finally, our Lord being laid into the tomb. So all of these things caused Our Lady tremendous suffering, and I think especially watching our Lord dying on the cross, tremendous suffering. Notice in today's gospel reading from the cross, he says to Mary, "Woman, here is your son," and then he says to the disciple, to John, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. So John the evangelist represents all of us. And in telling John to take Mary as his own mother, he's really telling all of us that we need to take her as our own mother also. And she cares for us. So what mother would delight to see their children suffering? No mother. Every mother suffers when they see their children suffering. In like manner, Mary is our spiritual mother, and she suffers when she sees us suffering. And she pleads with her divine Son, give them the graces that they need to overcome all these sufferings. So suffering is really ultimately brought about by sin. So sin is the obstacle to our own happiness. And Mary wants us to perfect ourselves, to purify ourselves, to be worthy of heaven, because we know not when we will die. So she wants to help us to do all these things, and this is why she is our greatest intercessor and the one that has the greatest influence with her divine Son. Those of you who have the missalettes that have the daily readings in it, for today's feast, there's a beautiful quotation from St. Basil. And as you know, the saints, they often say things in a very short way, a very short phrase, but very, very profound, and they have a deep insight into the spiritual life. So I just wanted to read to you this quotation from St. Basil, this saying from St. Basil. So he states, "As the sun surpasses all the stars in luster, so the sorrows of Mary surpass all the tortures of the martyrs." So the sorrows of Mary surpass all the tortures of the martyrs. Hard to imagine. Think of all the suffering the martyrs went through, and Mary's sufferings, they far exceed all these things. It was pointed out that, when it comes to the sufferings of Christ, because he was a perfect man without sin, he was more sensitive. And it wasn't just his physical sufferings that he was more sensitive to, but also the psychological sufferings, the suffering of rejection. And the same applies to Our Lady. So she suffered more intensely next to Christ than anyone else. And, when Our Lady appeared in Fatima in 1917 and revealed that God wishes to establish devotion to her Immaculate Heart, one of the things that she also revealed was the desire to, or the encouragement of Catholics to make the first 5 First Saturday devotions to make reparation to her Immaculate Heart for the outrages committed against her, the blasphemies and all these things, all these rejections of her. So in other words, she is in heaven, Mary is in heaven, but she longs for all of us, all of her spiritual children, to make it to heaven. And, imagine a mother who experiences a son or daughter who turns against his or her own mother and rejects her and blasphemes her and utters all kinds of horrible things about her. Well, this is what Our Lady is experiencing. And it's important that we reflect upon this. So she is a loving mother. She has, the greatest love conceivable for any child. And, one of her titles is the refuge of sinners. Sometimes people are afraid to turn to God or even to turn to Our Lady because they think they're so unlovable because of their sins. But Mary is the refuge of sinners. So we need to turn to her. We need to allow her to love us. We need to allow ourselves to benefit by her love for us and to benefit by her intercessory prayer for us by having a devotion to her, by praying the rosary on a daily basis if we can, or just, remembering her. Some people pray 3 Hail Marys in the morning, 3 Hail Marys at night before going to bed. It's a very good practice to get into. Let us meditate on Our Lady's sorrows. Let us comfort her by the love and consolation that we show to her by means of our own love and devotion for her.